Good morning, everyone. Call the meeting to order. Dr. Pemberton, thank you for the lovely reception last night. It's been a while since I've heard a harp live. That was a very nice touch, but the food was excellent, and it was nice to have a chance to talk with so many of you, so thanks for that. Why don't we jump right in? I think we had no agenda. We had a spot held for public comment. Lisa, my understanding is we have no one signed up for public comment, correct? So with that, I will turn it over to Sean for Planning, Policy, and Government Affairs agenda.
Thank you, Chairman Liebig. Good morning, everyone. For the PPGA agenda, first up, we have a revision to Board Policy 7C that talks about various endorsements for Career Technical Educator Certificate. And this, briefly, it just adds a new endorsement for aviation, which is a growing field in Idaho. And then there's also some technical corrections in there, but Pete and Matt are here if for more explanation or any questions.
Thank you, board members. Matthew Reiber, State Board of Education. I think Board Member Keough said it perfectly, adding that aviation credential that both industry students and teachers are asking for. We're seeing it as a growing field for students coming out of high school, and those couple of technical corrections as we crack open board policy to change things. We just update references that are since outdated, different numbers, different IDAPA references, everything like that.
Great. Any questions?
Questions from the board? I think you're good, Sean.
I would move to approve the second reading of Board Policy 7C, Career Technical Educator Certification as provided in Attachment 1.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Callie. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. I neglected to welcome Cindy and Debbie to the board meeting. Good to see you all virtually. Okay, Sean?
Next item on the agenda is Idaho Public Television. I'd like to invite Director Tucker up, and he's going to provide us a timely update on how things are going at Idaho Public Television. Did you have any introductory remarks, Matt?
No, Board Member Keough, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Oh, come on.
Director Tucker speaks for himself. I think he does great.
That's why there's a chair in between us. Jeff Tucker, Director, General Manager of Idaho Public Television. Happy to be with all of you today. So I'll keep it high level. There's a lot of things that have happened in the last 6 months or so. That's why my voice isn't here. Quick high level of the federal, what happened at the federal level. Project 2025 was right on for the FCC changes and investigations. It was investigating perceived media bias. That's one of the things that the FCC, now Chairman Carr, wrote. Also, FCC investigation into sponsorship activities by public media organizations, and some are under investigation, including PBS. We have not received any letters about anything we've run. We're very conservative about what we do, and we follow the guidelines that the FCC has laid out for us. So, March 26th, PBS President Paula Kerger and CEO of NPR, Catherine Mayer, present in front of the House DOJ Subcommittee, and then the executive order comes out entitled Ending Taxpayer Subsidization of Biased Media. And what that did was directed CPB to cease all direct and indirect funding to PBS and NPR at the national level, not necessarily at the local level. But what it also did was told us at the local level that we couldn't use our CPB funds to pay for our dues that give us what PBS gives us. I don't know where that is, honestly, at the moment. PBS, NPR did sue, and since CPB is now shut down, it's kind of a moot point but we'll get into that.
Can you define what is CP, all these acronyms?
Oh, yes, Corporation for Public Broadcasting is the funding entity for, used to be the funding entity for public media nationwide. So taxpayer funding from the federal level would go into Congress. Congress would then, it's about $1.60 per person. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting Act of 1967 would then send that out as grants to local public television stations and radio stations throughout the U.S.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. And then the rescission package sent to Congress in early June. Most of us know what happened there. That was rescinding of appropriation for 26 and 27. And that would be the federal 26 and 27. So what that is appropriated money that was not in our bank account, was not in anybody's bank account, that was just appropriated, was stopped and pulled back. Since we are 2 years advance funding, that means we just got done spending 24, and we're now, October 1, just beginning to spend 25. And I'll get into that a little more. So where we are nationally, no CPB, they're shutting down. There's a small amount of money that may come to each public media organization, just CPB had interest income, things like that, but that's under $20,000 we hear. And there could be some possible grants that still are coming out of CPB because they were already in the works, but we could be in the running for something. I don't know. We would be a subcontractor of, let's say Iowa gets a contract to do something for agricultural reporting from market to market, and they subcontract to us to produce agricultural-based reporting. Who knows? So, the $2 million that we have now in that private side, and I'll go into the bigger picture of our budget in a second, we have $2 million like we had last year. We have a runway to figure out what we're going to do. So we're not stopping the horse, we're just pulling back on the reins. We're going to continue doing what we've done, telling Idaho stories. We're not closing our door. PBS is not shutting down. And we're going to provide education in communities around the U.S. I wish it was the U.S., it would be Idaho. And of course, it's a business, it's a nonprofit, it's also a state agency, but the business side, the Friends of Idaho Public Television side, we're going to do it in 5 areas. Attrition, retirements, and we already had, one has happened, 3 are coming. We've had 2 people that have left the organization, and that's normal for an organization to have people flow through it. We had 1 layoff, and it was in finance. It was directly connected to a person that did all the accounting for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting grant. Expenses, of course. We're looking in our couches to find pennies and nickels to do what we need to do. We're cutting what we can, part-time hours, things of that nature. Then revenue, increased revenue. This is the hard one. People are giving more, but we don't know if it's always ongoing. So we need to know there's a certain amount of ongoing in order to plan. So we've had some large checks come in. Those are being saved for the emergency that I don't know when it will come. This is not an emergency. We're waiting for that to happen. And also the money that we have in the bank, the non-CPB money that we have in the bank will cover things like we just wrote a grant to the MJ Murdoch Charitable Trust for some hardware, and we had to have a match. And there's going to be some, like I say, technical emergency that comes up. And we did have some state funding that came in that wouldn't quite cover the equipment that we needed. That will be kind of a match for that. So we're helping the general fund offset, which is, I think, good. So overall, pulling back on the reins, we're not stopping the horse. We will be smaller next year at this time, unless there's some $2 million that pops out of the couch. We're going to stick to our knitting. Outdoor Idaho, Idaho Reports, Idaho Experience. Everybody's going to be focusing on those shows so people see what they love and why they do give. Will there be federal funds in the future? I'm counting on not. I don't see that happening. And that I think, is the basic overview of Idaho Public Television. One thing I didn't get to is our budget is about 12.5 million. 3.5 is from the general fund. 1 million is from the Millennium Fund. We're doing some anti-drug work, being asked by the Millennium Fund to do anti-drug work based upon their strategic plan. And then the rest, I think if I'm adding up right, it's about $8 million. So that $8 million is that private side that I've been talking about. So take $2 million out of that, it leaves 6. And I would not be a good business operator if I cut or reduced any of our fundraising activities, because that's what is needed right now. So really, it's about a 30 to 35% cut in our private side. So that's where we're at right now, and I feel good that we're going to get to where we need to get, but it will be smaller next year. And with that, I'll answer any
So
questions.
just, when you say the private side, is the federal, are you considering that private? So it's essentially $2 million of federal money that used to be there that isn't? Is that on a $12 million budget? Is that
So
rough math?
the 8 million on the private side, CPB is considered private money when it gets to us, so that was 8 million. And so now it's 6 on the private side. And our fundraising folks are pretty good at what they do, but it's a small group, and we're looking everywhere.
And what have you seen from viewership and just the usage of public media in the state over the past number of years?
People are watching. We just did three events, Moscow, Coeur d'Alene, and Sandpoint, filled the theaters. People love what we do. They see the good in what we're doing in the documentary production. They know Outdoor Idaho. They see us as a positive source of news, entertainment, and education, and especially from the local side. And I think that's the important part, is keep talking local, because that's what people watch.
Well, I think your why, it's not surprising to me, given how great the product you put out is, that you would be seeing an increase in philanthropy from Idahoans because they value what they do and they recognize the shortfall of federal funding.
Yeah.
But I think you're wise to think about those as one time and put them in a rainy day fund. Figure out what the sustainable philanthropy is. Put that increase, because people are going to forget, right? And so
Right.
you want that to give you a longer runway. But
Right.
appreciate the presentation.
Yeah.
Questions from the board? Callie?
Kurt and Sean, I just wondered about the learning platforms. For instance, there's probably separate allocations for the Idaho Digital Learning Academy. Help with that?
Well, no, we don't. We have worked with IDLA, but
Okay.
PBS has a PBS Learning Media platform that has learning assets, video, lesson plans, games and such, and that's all free for teachers and parents. A lot of homeschools use it, but we can add, they add in the national programming. Ken Burns coming up, they'll break it down into lesson plans. We do the same with Idaho Reports. Well, not with Idaho Reports, excuse me, Idaho Experience. And so we'll still be doing that. Yeah. And if I may, I do want to, we appreciate what the general fund and the state legislature does for us, because it helps that broadcast network. And the broadcast network is all the translators, transmitters that are getting the signal out. The signal includes our content, but it also includes emergency alerts. And it also allows us to work with Idaho Office on Emergency Management to make sure we can get additional, above and beyond emergency alerts, emergency messaging to talk about communication of emergencies in areas, communication of where people go for additional assistance and things like that. So we've been working actively with them to make sure we can be part of the public safety in Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
And based on your budget today, with the legislative support, do you feel like you have the capital you need to maintain that safety hardware?
Basically, yes. We could always use more coverage. The federal side, through FEMA, had a granting entity called the Next Generation Warning System. Came from FEMA, CPB managed it. It was to build back our network. A permanent building fund helped us with our transmitters. FEMA and GWS grant was to help us with our translators. Translators are in the small pockets of Idaho that the transmitters can't get to. That granting pool of money went away. So we will be asking from the state to get those translators in the future, but we'll cycle through maybe ask for 3 a year, something like that. Won't be able to do it this year, but maybe next year.
Thank you. Sean?
Thank you. Just a reminder, how many folks are on your staff?
We have about 14 general funded positions, and those are mostly technical. It would be me, some additional finance, but mostly the technical side. And they also help with Idaho in session. They're the folks that keep that machine working down at the state legislature. And then everything else is on the private side, paid for by revenue that comes in from donors.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the update, and thank you for your work. I know it's a difficult time to steer through, so.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Next on the agenda is Boise State University President Search Update, and I believe Board Member Turnbull or Board Member Liebig.
Yeah, why don't I start, and then I'll turn it over to David, who's, as you all know, has been leading the search process. So thanks, Sean. I want to take a moment to provide an update on the Boise State University presidential search and to thank our search committee led by Board Member David Turnbull for the tremendous amount of time and care they've devoted to this process. When we began this search, the board set out to find a leader who can build on Boise State's momentum, someone who can connect the university's innovation and research strengths with Idaho's workforce and economic, while also ensuring students from every corner of our state see Boise State as a place where they belong and can succeed. This is one of the most important decisions the board will have to make. The next president will shape not just the future of Boise State, but also the role higher education plays in Idaho's long-term success. We owe it to our students, our faculty, and the people of Idaho to get it right. Our search committee worked diligently through a national process that attracted a strong pool of candidates and significant interest from across the country. As the search advanced, it became clear that this process deserves more time. This process matters because what's at stake for our students, our community, and to Boise State is just too important to rush. The board remains confident in the university's current leadership and the continued strength of the Boise State community as this process continues. Now I'd like to turn it over to Board Member and Search Committee Chair David Turnbull to share more details about the process and next steps.
Thank you, Kurt, and I just want to echo your appreciation for the search committee and the subcommittees who have all put in a tremendous amount of time and obviously have the best interest of the state and Boise State University at heart. As Kurt mentioned, we've been involved in an extensive and deliberate process, and I want to share a little bit more of the detail as we move forward. When the Boise State Presidential Search Committee began its work earlier this year, we were very pleased with the and the level of interest we received from across the country, and it was extensive and it was deep. Boise State's growth, innovation, and strong community partnerships have put it on a national radar, and that was reflected in the caliber of the applicants. As we continued our discussions, a number of those top candidates chose to withdraw rather than risk their current positions. And I think I made it clear from the very beginning that we were not interested in jeopardizing anybody's current positions or careers, and we knew that that could become an issue. Under Idaho law, the names of at least 5 finalists must be made public, or the entire applicant pool is required to be made public. And while transparency is valuable, it can create challenges in a national search, particularly for sitting presidents, provosts, CEOs, and other senior leaders who may not want their interest in a new role disclosed. The committee agreed that moving forward without a full slate of finalists would be a disservice to Boise State. So we made the decision to reevaluate and make sure we're taking the right approach. We're now working closely with our national search firm to assess what adjustments can help us re-engage top talent and position the search for success. Extending the timeline gives us the opportunity to do that strategically. It also allows us to reach potential candidates who may not have been ready to enter the process during the academic year. In many ways, this timing works out to our advantage. Sitting presidents or senior leaders often need several months to plan a transition from their current institutions, and by extending our process, we can better align with the natural academic cycle. In the meantime, Boise State is in very capable hands. Interim President Jeremiah Shin has done an outstanding job leading the university and maintaining momentum. Special thanks to you, Jeremiah. He's been a steady, collaborative presence who continues to work closely with the board, faculty, staff, and students to keep the university's mission front and center. Under his leadership, Boise State continues to thrive academically, financially, and in its partnerships across the state. I want to thank my fellow committee members again for their dedication and professionalism throughout the process. They are still engaged. And I also want to thank the Boise State community for its patience and trust. The board and the committee remain unified in our commitment to finding the right person, someone who can lead Boise State boldly into its next chapter, strengthen Idaho's higher education system, and serve our students with excellence. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any questions or comments from the board on the recommended approach and current status? Callie?
I want to thank you for all your hard work. I know that's Cindy Sidaway and I were involved in the ISU presidential search, and it does take a lot of time and effort, which is recommended. With regard to this search, I was wondering, did the search firm notify all applicants that there was the possibility that their name would become public? And is there the thought that we would move to a new search firm or retain the existing search firm?
Kelly, yes, the search firm did notify the applicants of the process, so they were aware of that. And that led to many highly qualified people bowing out early in the process and then several bowing out later in the process as they considered the implications of their decision to move forward. We haven't discussed anything regarding the search firm going forward, so that'll be for a future discussion, I think, Kurt.
I think that's right. Yes, the search committee has not had that conversation yet. But I will say, as David said, the search firm that I was really pleased with the candidate pool that the search firm put in front of it. It was not an issue of the level of talent. It was in the pool, which is what you're primarily hiring a search firm to do. And frankly, they did an outstanding job of organizing the whole process and took a lot of weight off. I think, David, you would say that certainly you as the leader of the search firm. So I wouldn't say I was in any way disappointed with their effort, but it's a decision we're going to have to face going forward.
Kurt, is that a decision of the search committee or a decision of this board to hire the search committee, the search firm?
Search committee. Who ultimately?
Search committee.
Search committee made the decision.
Yeah.
Search committee made the decision. After, I can't remember how many we interviewed, 3 or 4 different search committees. 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any other questions for David on the process? Thank you. But our commitment to you all is, as we continue work through this, we will make sure that we're coming back to the board and keeping you informed. But thanks, David. Thank you for your
leadership. And I would
leadership.
also say we're confident that this is all going to work out. Mm-hmm. And the timing isn't at all unfortunate, I don't think, because of the academic year and that cycle.
That's the thing. And David spoke about this, and we all know this. If we were looking at a turnaround situation, at Boise State or negative trend lines, a delay might be a problem. Nothing could be further from where we are today. I had the fortune, I was invited, well, I think we were all invited, but I was able to attend the opening of the new residence hall, Syringa Hall, on homecoming weekend. And it was, the energy on that campus was just unbelievable. And the number of parents and alumni that were, I was, and you could feel it in downtown Boise. I couldn't get you couldn't get a reservation. I mean, it was just, the city was overwhelmed with Boise State alums and parents. So, enrollment's up.
14%?
I don't know what the
Is
number.
that right, Jeremiah? Yeah. First year class, 14%. So it's in good hands.
It's in good hands. And as David said, you think about the typical presidents aren't going to typically leave mid-year, So I don't think this delay, as David said, hurts us at all. We're going to come up with a good outcome here. I'm confident of that. So, John, I think that.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chairman Levick. That concludes the Planning, Policy, and Governmental Affairs agenda. I think it's a record for time.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean. Okay, let's keep moving. Callie, I'll turn it over to you for URSA, Instruction, Research, and Student Affairs.
Yes, thank you. We have 3 action items on the URSA agenda today and 1 informational item. And additionally, there's a work that will be led by, I believe, President Levick and Heidi Estrom, who is our Chief Academic Affairs Officer in the State Board office. So the first action item is a policy action item, and it's a first reading. It's with regard to Board Policy 3E, Certificates and Degrees. And it has to do with micro-credentials and also a reduced credit baccalaureate degree. Currently, some institutions across the nation, including BYU Idaho, are offering 90 credit degree bachelor's degrees. So it's basically a reduced credit bachelor's degree, and it allows students to get through the process quicker and to begin working. It's not diluted. In my opinion, the student still has to complete all general education requirements. And what it does, and their major electives, their 300 and 400 level classes. What it does do, however, is there seems to be a trend where many students today want to have a minor in addition to their major. So they really don't have time for that. It does also, there's some talk that we would need to, if they want to go on and get like a graduate degree, there would have to be some type of a bridge program. So this is kind of a new, innovative thought. And ISU is currently very interested in this program because if you think about it, they're in direct competition with BYU Idaho. So they have 3 programs that they're bringing forward. So the board will monitor this, and we will have new reporting requirements. And also, with regard to micro-credentialing, this provides institutions with greater flexibility to use existing badging platforms. Additionally, establish best practice standards for digital badging. So that's primarily the major changes with regard to that policy. If there's any questions, Heidi or myself can try to answer those for you.
Questions from the board? I can't imagine this would work for all degree pathways. Example, in engineering, as an example. I can't imagine you could get through an engineering program with 90 credits. So where do you see this gaining traction most quickly in our institutions? Which degree pathways?
Thank you, President Liebig. Let's see. Here we go. Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. This kind of degree, you're exactly right, is not going to be appropriate for most or even many or most kinds of degrees. The kinds of degrees that the institutions are considering are what I would say streamlined and very workforce focused. All of our degrees are workforce focused to some extent, but these, as we're imagining them so far, are designed for largely working adults, folks who are already working and need a degree to advance in their field and need a streamlined option to do so. It does, as Chair Roach mentioned, raise additional complications to consider if those students did want to go on to graduate school or some other advanced kinds of degrees. So the institutions, I think very wisely, are thinking very carefully about what that fourth year equivalent might be for students who do want to go on even with these degrees. That's also why we've recommended in the motion language that we start in focused ways with just several, up to 3 degrees per institution if they want to even develop these, so that we can monitor these and make sure they're not doing harm to students.
Sorry,
Sorry.
we had a spider
A
incident.
giant spider just landed
Like it's a theme.
Never have I ever.
down from the roof.
That was,
A Halloween
impressive.
it was
That was a real spider, not a little one.
yeah, that was, I've never seen a spider that large before.
Sorry, I divided here.
Whew, okay.
Just a follow-up.
Sure.
Is this something that community colleges could utilize as well? We've had a couple of community colleges dabble with baccalaureate degrees. I mean, have you gotten any feedback from community colleges on this?
President Liebig, the feedback we've received so far is that the institutions want to be cautious and careful and deliberate and make sure that they're not, that the degrees that they do introduce don't cause undue harm or confusion. There will need to be a lot of additional advising with these kinds of degrees for students to truly understand the implications of choosing a pathway that might have ramifications down the road that they don't understand as 18-year-olds. So we want to be really careful with these.
Yeah, I asked that same question, and I think the community colleges are just taking kind of a wait-and-see approach to see how it transpires.
And what are the accreditation constraints in this area?
Yeah, that's a good question, President Liebig. We spoke with NWCCU. They require that the outcomes be exactly the same. The learning outcomes are the same as they are for any other bachelor's degree. And they emphasize that it is a bachelor's degree. It's not an advanced associate's degree. So those are the kind of criteria they're going into this with, and then encouraged us to set the more specific recommendations that will help our institutions now begin to develop these.
Kurt,
And yes, David.
go ahead if you've got
I
follow-up.
just had one follow-up then.
ahead.
And my understanding from following the national trends is Idaho is not plowing new ground here, that this is a trend that we're seeing elsewhere in higher ed. Is that correct?
That's correct. One of the challenges is that to get good data, you have to be several years out. So even those who are ahead are only a few years ahead. And even BYU Idaho has introduced them in a very particular and specific context for international students. So we don't have much data yet, and it'll be years before we have data. So that's why we're trying to both allow for innovation and make sure that we're doing our due diligence and collecting research on these as we go.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, I think innovation's the key here, and just curious, if you could tell us what coursework is getting cut in that 1 year, what kind of coursework is being eliminated?
Board Member Turnbull, President.
We can also have ISU come up.
What?
We can also have ISU come up too if you want.
Absolutely, yes. ISU is furthest along in these. I know the president and provost are here. They could speak to it. They'll be bringing forward proposals in December, but the policy we've written it follows what we're seeing as best practice so far in these very early degrees, which includes the entire general education sequence and essentially the equivalent of a major. So what's cut are what are called restricted electives or opportunity for minors.
Yeah, and you presented that in committee, and I just wanted to clarify that for general audience, but looks like we've got help here.
Yeah, Adam, if you could provide some examples of what you're thinking about.
Absolutely.
And maybe, Adam, could you just introduce yourself for the record? Thank you.
Absolutely, President. I'm Adam Bradford from Idaho State University. I'm the Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs there. And I apologize for inviting myself to the table. I just wanted to make sure that if you had questions specifically related to this, that we could answer them. Most of these degrees that we're proposing eliminate sort of the unrestricted electives that would be a portion of this degree, to focus really in on the skill building aspect of them, because they are very skill focused, work-based focused. So that's essentially in a nutshell what happens. So I could speak in a little more detail to the specific degree programs that we're bringing forward, but I'm not sure that you want that level of detail.
No. So I guess the point is it's tailored to people who know their path, that know where they're going. So you cut out those electives that are probably extraneous to their path.
Yeah, it does. It does prepare them. There's, and I think that we to Chief Academic Officer Heidi Estrom's point, I think we want to be very cautious, because we believe that there is a pathway forward here. Chairman, our board member Turnbull, to be able to attend to these students' needs. But we are reducing their overall level of education. When you can't shave a year off of college education and not have an impact on someone's learning and on someone's intellectual growth and development. So we need to be very careful as we build these out, and we need to be very thoughtful about what we're doing. And that's the approach we're trying to take. And we'll be collecting data to understand better the outcomes associated with these degrees in comparison to our four-year degrees. We don't currently measure student learning outcomes for elective courses, or even when we build those into certain types of certificates and other things. That's never been what's been required of us. So we need to approach it cautiously, because in removing those things, in a way, we're removing some things whose effects we've never been asked to fully measure. And so we need to be cautious, and we're taking that approach. That's the exact approach we're trying to take.
And as Heidi mentioned, you don't want to curtail their future pathways.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
If they needed a 4-year to pursue an advanced degree, for example.
And that's to Heidi's point. ISU will be building bridge programs in multiple different sort of specialized areas to attend to exactly that phenomenon. We have to think about the life cycle of the entire student educational experience as we build this out, so that we don't inadvertently shut down pathways for students in the future. That could be disastrous for them.
I think that's excellent clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Pete?
Yes, thank you. Is this being driven by cost?
It's being driven, at the national level, it's not, I don't believe it's being driven by cost. I believe it's being driven by workforce need and by the perception of lack of responsiveness, just to be very frank, in higher education to cost associated, so to a degree cost, but also to a degree the purpose. So I think there's something philosophical there too. The purpose of higher education. Are we workforce trainees, or are we training workforce, or are we preparing students for a lifetime of learning and intellectual development? So those are all aspects of the national conversation around this.
Because I do understand the cost point of it. My concern would be coming from a perception of the higher institutions that we are weakening requirements to earn a bachelor's degree, and therefore, are we setting individuals up that, yes, I've got a degree in 1, 2, 3, but the view of that will be, and that always causes a problem. And so I will be, like David, very, very interested to see the programs that are being offered. This is, in my opinion, something of a very radical change into what we're asking of the universities. And so I would caution that we move very carefully on this before we, and not saying that we are, embrace this as a path forward. I understand the cost. I would be very reluctant to see the intellectual rigor weakened in the sense of moving someone forward early.
I would simply say I share those concerns, very much so.
This is something that's going to be a good lead into our work session, I think, because my concern around this is because we've been so innovative in our dual credit approach, and so many of our high school 18-year-olds come into college with 15, 30 credits. You could see a scenario here where a student shows up with 30 credits and gets a 90-degree baccalaureate, and it's only on campus for 2 years. And I just reflect on my own college experience. At least 50% of what I got out of my college experience had nothing to do with the classroom. And I just think it's potentially a huge disservice to students who miss all those extracurricular opportunities you get in over a 3 or 4 year. Like, you're not going to become leader of the student council if, as a sophomore, as a 2 year. I just think there's a lot to think about here that to some degree ties into the work session we're going to have here in a few minutes about what is the role of higher ed. But I think we got to be innovative, and I think there are a lot of reasons to think about this in certain select pathways. So,
President Liebig, if I may, I do want to applaud our team, Heidi, and Idaho State University, and the provost at all of our institutions for being so thoughtful in the approach here. So the concerns that I hear around this table, I have heard from them as well, and these are at the forefront, and that's part of the reason why you're seeing a very cautious approach and what's being proposed by this policy to allow this incremental exploration of this opportunity for our students. But the level of thoughtfulness and you'll also notice that when assuming this moves forward and the programs that ISU is interested in pursuing are very workforce focused, and so we're seeing a really narrow focus in the types of programs focused on skill development as opposed to trying to supplant something. And we certainly at the board office will not support this becoming a race to the bottom for our students. Absolutely not. And but we do want to be responsive to the real economic and practical concerns that are faced by our state. And this board has called our institutions to bring innovation and to explore these very issues. We know the legislature is interested in it and the people of Idaho are interested in it. So I'm grateful that we're not just jumping in, and that the deliberateness that has been demonstrated by our institutions and by my team. I'm grateful that we have these people working on this issue. So,
President Liebig?
yeah, Heidi.
If I may, it would be nice to have Provost Bradford speak a little bit about the complications related to financial aid. I think that's another wrinkle that the institutions will have to grapple with and students will have to grapple with this kind of degree.
Thank you, President Liebig. This is another one of those sort of complications. Currently under federal regulations for financial aid, once a student earns a bachelor's degree, they're no longer eligible for undergraduate financial aid. So if we have a student who graduates in 3 years and then consequently wants to come back and earn that sort of, take part in that bridge program and move into graduate education, the sort of bridge program would largely be at the undergraduate level. They'll no longer be eligible for undergraduate aid. And so we'll have to work through the process of bringing them in, essentially targeting a graduate program and be able to open up graduate financial aid. But ultimately, that will mean it will be more costly for that student to earn the equivalent of the 120 credit hours that a 4-year bachelor's degree would offer than it would be had they remained in school, been able to take advantage of things like Pell Grants and use the undergraduate financial aid piece. So this is where advising and making students aware of the implications of seeking this pathway becomes really, really important. It's going to be, it's a bit of a new day, and we are going to really need to make sure that students understand the implications of the choices that they're making, so that they don't inadvertently choose something that would negatively impact them. To Executive Director White's point, we can't allow the allure of a faster degree program to pull students towards this option who who truly, given maybe their career trajectory and their ultimate outcomes, might do better to simply stay in and earn the traditional 120 credit hour degree and keep some doors and some financial opportunities on the table other than shut those down. So there's a lot of complicated pieces to this, which is why I think the approach of we're going to be very workforce focused. We're going to be very cautious. We're going to monitor the data. We're going to get outcomes. I think is the right approach in this particular instance. But there's a lot of nuance here that has to be navigated.
Well, given how articulate you are on the complexity of the issue, it gives me confidence that you will be very thoughtful in what you bring forward. So I'm supportive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Callie?
I'll go to motion. I move to approve the first reading of proposed amendments to Board Policy 3E, Certificates and Degrees, as submitted in Attachment 1, and to establish a cap of no more than 3 new reduced credit baccalaureate programs per post-secondary institution as part of a pilot phase that will allow board staff and participating institutions to assess public interest and industry need. Board staff and participating institutions are directed to report back to the board with findings and recommendations in accordance with a timeline established by the board's executive director.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you, David. We have a motion to second. Any further discussion or questions on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, the motion passes unanimously. Callie?
Our next action item relates to Board Policy 2, Admission Standards, and this is a first reading of this policy. It's just some minor amendments with regard to admission standards. It removes specific reference to Cognia, which is an accreditor for secondary education. It enables board staff to develop a process to include more secondary school accreditors in admission standards. Heidi, did you want to add anything? Are there any questions?
Questions for Callie or Heidi? Okay, Callie?
Okay, I move to approve the first reading of proposed amendments to Board Policy 3Q, admission standards as presented in Attachment 1.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Sean. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. Callie?
Okay, our third action item relates to Board Policy 3U, Instructional Materials Access and Affordability. This is a first reading of this policy. We've talked about this issue in the past, and there have been several changes to this policy in the past, but these are some additional changes that we're proposing. We need to improve some of the definitions in the policy, clarify and streamline reporting requirements on instructional materials, and it improves transparency for students on curricular material options through a common learning management system, which all of our institutions now are utilizing Canvas. So that's been a recent change, which is helpful because now they're all on the same platform. And it also improves transparency for students relating to required post-course information and syllabi. And some of the proposed amendments are the result of the resolution that we approved with regard to the freedom of expression in higher education that you'll remember the board adopted in December of 2024. Are there any comments or questions?
So this is related to open source. Is that open source materials? Is that what we're talking about here?
President Liebig, the open educational resources.
Yeah.
That's one small part of this. The policy is in addition to that about students understanding the choices that they're making and having the information that they need to make at the time when they're registering for class. So that's part of it.
On a separate, can I just make a request for a future agenda item? Mm-hmm. If I only accomplish one thing on my time on the board, having one common student information system across our institutions, like I never thought we'd get there. So just to hear that we're there is amazing to me.
I was excited.
The future agenda item would be, all right, now that we're there, I'd like to hear from the CIOs. What are the opportunities to really collaborate now, sharing curriculum, sharing, where are those opportunities that now we've broken down all those walls, you know what I mean? And there are opportunities in terms of how students transfer, and it just, to me, it creates a whole bunch of potential efficiency if our institutions are working together to leverage that platform, if that makes sense. So I'd like to dig into that at a future board meeting if we could.
President Liebig, just quickly, I think you're exactly right. What students experience is exactly the same platform. So when they're taking classes from multiple institutions, they don't have to relearn where to find their assignments, for example. The other exciting thing we're seeing already is faculty collaborating. So sharing entire modules or sharing readings, and they can much more easily do that across the state. So that's been great to see.
And can it be the portal for the open source? We've really had an effort to kind of no-cost curricular materials. Can that be the portal by which all faculty in the state can see what best practice is in their discipline? And it just seems to me that the opportunities are pretty significant now.
I agree.
Okay. Yep. So for future discussion.
I have another question in that regard. Heidi, does it save costs for the institutions because we're all on one platform now?
Chair Roach, President Liebig, yes. So our board office can help negotiate the contract. This contract started initially with some additional COVID-related funds that helped us move all 8 institutions to this. We are now back to the institutions having to pay their portion, but we are able to negotiate a contract including all institutions, so it's much less expensive than it used to be. It's still an investment for the institutions, but much more affordable since we can negotiate on behalf of all 8.
Okay, I'll go to motion. I move to approve the first reading of Board Policy 3U, Instructional Material Access and Affordability, as submitted in Attachment 1.
Is there a second? Thank you, Sean. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussions or questions on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Okay, this fourth item is an informational item, and we did decide to bring it forward to the full board because it does relate to some, really a lot of work that's been done by our institutions and our staff and at the request of the legislature. So it's an update on academic program exemptions, and this specifically relates to our community colleges and is in reference to Idaho Code Section 675909D. Our community colleges also have to provide exemptions. And does this relate to Senate Bill 1198 as well?
This is Senate Bill 1198.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so these are the exemptions under that bill.
Yeah, so now the community colleges are also responsible for bringing forward exemptions. And of course, they have to run this through their own board of trustees. And this summer, the board staff issued guidance defining and developing a process for limited exemptions, and that was both for higher ed or the four-year institutions and the community colleges. Subsequent guidance advised community colleges to seek approval for program exemptions from their local boards. 2 community colleges have submitted program exemption requests to the board. Both are transfer-related program pathways in areas that align with university academic programs. Heidi, did you want to add anything to this, or Jen?
I think I'm fine, actually.
Can you just maybe give a broader context here, Jen, on just the exemption process and remind the board of 1198 and just kind of where we sit today?
Right. So there is an exemptions process that it is very prescriptive, so very narrow in terms of the programs that can be submitted for exemption related to Idaho Code 675909, or as we usually talk about it under Senate Bill 1198. And those exemptions have to relate to programs, and I'm going to be paraphrasing here, but that relate to involve gender, ethnic, or there's another race-based studies, I believe. And so our institutions have gone through a rather intensive process of determining what required coursework for which no alternatives exist fall within that category of programmatic exemption. And so it's a very narrow, it's a subset of a subset of a subset in terms of what they can submit. And if you look at our institutions and the vast number of programs that are offered across all of our institutions, the number of programs that have sought and received exemptions are extraordinarily narrow. And our institutions are continuing to explore, where it is possible to offer alternative pathways. Sometimes it's just not possible to offer alternative pathways because of licensure or accreditation or programmatic level accreditation requirements. So our four-year institutions have been working on this process in partnership with the 2 years since this bill was enacted. But because of the framing of the legislation that was passed, community colleges had to go through their own boards before bringing it to our board for consideration of those exemptions. They've now gone through those processes, and so the programs that are now being proposed, as was indicated, relate to transfer pathways, and if I'm correct, relate to, I'm trying to remember the type of program. It was sociology. So these are areas where we were expecting to see exemptions, and because of the nature of the curriculum that's being used. And again, we're talking about a subset of a subset of a subset, very narrow. And we continue to be pleased with the hard work that's being done at our institutions to engage on these issues while still, prioritizing student free speech and academic freedom among our faculty.
Thank you, Jen.
Chair Roach or
Yes.
President Liebig?
Yeah.
Just to make sure everybody saw that the full program list is in your board materials, and it's sociology and social work.
And in both of those cases, the licensure requires that, right? Requires that content. Is that-
Definitely social work.
Definitely social work, sociology less so, but the nature of that intellectual exploration is by necessity touches areas of gender-based relations and things like that. So it is understandable that that coursework ends up intersecting there.
Questions for Callie or Heidi?
President Liebig, that completes the IRSA agenda.
Well, that was no action there, just an information item.
Correct.
Great. Okay, thanks, Callie. Well, I think that concludes the committee reports. I'm going to ask for a 10-minute break so I can fill my coffee cup because I want you all energized for our work session because the purpose of this work session is to actually have good board dialogue, and I'll try to set the table, but I certainly want everybody to participate, and sometimes caffeine helps with that. So let's break for 10 minutes.
Okay.
Right off. Cool. Thanks, guys.
If we could reconvene, that would be great.
We don't have our blankets. That's okay.
I'm missing my boss up here. Oh, there she is.
Multitasking.
Yep.
Okay, so during the break, it came to my attention that the board materials that were just uploaded publicly and that this board reviewed was not the entire list of exempted materials, that there were some omissions and that certain of our institutions' exemptions weren't part of that packet. So am I correct? Did I summarize that properly?
Yes.
So I guess what I would do is, I just want to acknowledge that publicly, make board members aware of it, ask board staff to figure out a way to circulate the revised list to the board, as well as make sure it's put up publicly. Is that all right, Jen?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's transition to the work session. So in my 6 years on the board, this is sort of going to be a new experience for me. What I'm going to try to accomplish in this work session is to prepare for another work session, if that makes sense.
Shouldn't take long then.
Right.
Plan to plan meeting.
And the reason, and so at a high level, you all read the cover page, and and I'm going to just do a brief preamble, and it's going to be sort of free form, because in some ways my thinking on these issues is free form, and is evolving over time. And I'm really interested in how you all are thinking about this. But at a high level, the topic is demonstrating the value of post-secondary education. And I'd like to have a work session with all of our presidents, probably at the December meeting, where we engage in a really thoughtful conversation about that topic. And what tangibly can we do to improve the demonstration of value and the role we in higher ed and more broadly our education system play for the state of Idaho and our broader society.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
Start there, rather than kind of go right past that. Define for us what you mean when you say demonstration of value. Do you mean to what constituency? To all constituencies? What are you getting at?
And again, so let me just, again, free form. You have to be living under a rock to not have heard the challenges around what is the value of higher ed, both at the state level and the national level.
Well, that's why I'm asking questions.
Yeah.
Like, is it intrinsic? Is it external? Is it both? Is it?
I think it's both, but the question I personally wrestle with, and this is why I'm bringing it to all of you, is that when that conversation or question is asked, be it by our legislature, be it by our citizens, be it by our current administration, the conversation quickly swings to one of ROI. Are we giving the students the requisite skills to get a job and live the American dream? Which I think is a really valid challenge and a really valid conversation, and it should be a central role of any higher ed institution to ensure that our students, when they graduate, are better positioned to live the American dream and than they were when they entered, however you define that. But what I've been struggling with, and what I don't think that I've seen our institutions necessarily articulate as clearly as I wish they would, is that I think the higher ed is bigger than that. And this is where I've evolved. Some of this came from watching what the superintendent has done in really emphasizing civics education in our K-12 system, the focus the legislature's had on that. So some of my thinking has come from that, and whether that's enough. Some of it has come from watching what happened on our campuses in the wake of the Gaza-Israeli conflict. Didn't happen here, and I'm going to come back to that, but at a broad level, watching what happened and how that was handled institution by institution. Some of it came from the assassination of Charlie Kirk on one of the higher ed campuses, obviously not in this state. But all of these things that I've been watching nationally, and I'll say it's, and I've said this before, and Bill and you and I've talked about it. I think Idaho institutions are very different. I think the reason we didn't see protests on our campuses because we have different culture. All of our campus welcomed speakers like Charlie Cook and have been respectful when he's been on our campuses. So Idaho has always been different, but I'm still left with this feeling that there's more we could do in each of the, and I've sort of kind of compartmentalized it in three different areas. One is this idea of civic knowledge. I mean, are we sure that our graduates, I know, and Superintendent can talk about everything we're doing in K-12, but the reality is not all of our students are educated in Idaho. So are we, as higher ed institutions, confident that when our students graduate from an Idaho university, they are grounded in fundamental civic knowledge of how our country works, why the Constitution says what it says, why the Bill of Rights are the Bill of Rights, what are our values, all those things that are sort of important. That's leg one. Leg two is this whole idea, is our students grounded in the ability to discourse civilly, to debate complex issues, to not get uncomfortable in that debate, to recognize that civil discourse is the foundation of our democracy. It's how we resolve the inevitable conflicts we'll have in any free form of government. And then the third, and one that I haven't talked about, is this idea of civic engagement, this idea that if you get a degree from a higher ed education institution in Idaho, you should feel the responsibility to give back, because you're in a minority of citizens who have actually earned the degree. Every degree in Idaho has been subsidized by an Idaho taxpayer, and there should be, I think, an expectation that you give back. And it could be as simple as that you vote, but it probably should be more than that. And so the lingering question I have for all of our institutions and for you as a board is, I think there's an opportunity for us. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that yes, we have to prepare students for the job. But I think it's bigger than that. And I think we, as a board, I think our institutions could do a better job of articulating these other pieces. Those three other pieces I talked about, civic knowledge, civil discourse, civic engagement, that's just how I framed it in my mind. I'm just throwing it out there to you all. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Or am I missing something? But for me, that's the conversation I'd like to engage with our presidents on. I don't want to do it on my own. We're a governing board. And I think we have a unique opportunity here around this with America 250. We're going to celebrate in 2026, we're going to celebrate the 250th birthday of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. What better time to emphasize civics, the democracy, how democracies function, and set those expectations. Now, I believe, and this is the other thing I want to talk about, we're already doing a lot of that. Most of you have graduated from an Idaho institution, and I think there are a lot of great things that have gone on at our Idaho institutions around each of these areas. I'm not aware of all of them, certainly as a board member. I don't think we've necessarily articulated that this is part of what we do in higher ed. So anyway, I'm going to stop there and open it up. But what I'd like to do today is have you all weigh. Do you think I'm totally off base here? Do you think about the world differently? Do you think this conversation with higher ed is not? Well, I just like to know where you all are on this. But I'm just sharing with you the thoughts that have been rattling around my head for the last year or so. So I'll stop there.
If I may,
Yeah, Jen.
as we start to engage in this conversation too, this is a conversation we're having within the board office, and our staff is already engaging with the institutions to collect information about what they're actively doing, to learn more about what they're doing, and to help support the kind of proliferation of that information too into the public. But I think one of the things that I'm going to ask for through this work session is some guidance about the kind of data and examples that you're going to want us to work on collecting related to these concepts too, because I want deliverables, right? And I want to be in a position to give my team clear guidance attached to this. So for example, Heidi's been working on collecting information about curriculum, I think we saw even yesterday with LCSC's presentation about their their community service programs, including, their correctional education program. And that is a civic service, right? That is something where, they're lucky if they break even, and they do it because it's the right thing to do for our communities. It is a public service that is valuable and should be recognized. And they are not the only ones who are doing incredible public service for the state in building up our students and engaging in service learning programs that really serve Idaho. We need to do a better job as a board of collecting that information. So that's one of the other commitments I think I would make to you. But those are the types of things that it would be valuable for me to hear from you all about what information can I bring to you so you have a more full sense and we can be in a better position to speak to the public about the work that's being done on our campuses and what more work can be done.
Kurt, maybe if we have some university representatives that could come to the table here and tell us what they're doing in that regard right now.
Before we do that, though, can I get some additional clarity? Because I just want to understand kind of what we're driving at. Are we driving at demonstrating the value of higher education in Idaho to multiple constituencies and kind of encapsulating that better? Or are we talking about the value that higher ed provides from a civic participation contribution perspective? Because while those are related, they're not the same thing. And I kind of hear you guys saying both, and I'm not sure which we're driving at.
The way I hear what Kurt's saying is we're not just responsible for creating economic units, we need to be creating citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And that so it's a
with
civic responsibility, not the quote unquote value of higher education, because that's an important distinction. Because how this was framed as sort of value of higher education, which is
But I guess my
is a broader,
point, Bill,
broader
is I think it's to me the value of higher education is in both of those things.
I would
We
agree.
have to create, to use your term, students that are economic units, that are productive members of our economy. But we all equal.
Totally.
And we can debate as a.
But specificity matters in terms of
Yeah.
what are we conceptualizing at? What are we driving at here? Because if you're thinking about the value of higher education writ large, the number of deliverables is massive. If you're talking about the value of higher education specifically towards civic engagement and civic responsibility and all those things, okay, that's a smaller set of deliverables. It doesn't mean it's any less important, doesn't mean it's not related. I'm just trying to understand what are we conceptualizing, what are we driving at
It's
here?
the civic knowledge, civil discourse, and then that civic engagement or
Okay.
public service elements of it. So how do we orient around those three themes? And maybe we can ask some of the questions
That's
that helpful. that
Kurt,
we're
if I
preparing.
could, though,
Yeah, Pete.
on that, I think the goal is commendable. We all have life experiences. I even go back to my graduate work, which was probably before Jen was born. This kind of instruction has to be balanced. And we have to be very careful that a particular ideology becomes the one teaching this civic participation. And so that comes into a world to ensure that there is a balance of ideas, no dominance by any one point of view. And that's going to become a very difficult thing to deal with. Because even if I look at the children in the universities or the community colleges, especially in the males, there's not a lot of final development in thought. And so I would be very concerned that the approach is a very balanced approach, that there is no ideologies that are the dominant point of view.
So it sounds like one of the things that might be valuable for us to bring to you is how our universities are leaning into teaching kind of difficult and challenging concepts. Because I know our Centers for Learning and Teaching have been leaning into how do you teach to engage, to bring students out, clearly not to indoctrinate, but to engage them in the material, fortify them in their own beliefs, fortify them in the ability to speak from an informed perspective. So I think we can work on pulling together some of that information. And Yeah.
And to David, your point, what I'm trying to do today is get insights from you all on what you think would be worthwhile. You mentioned, would it be worthwhile bringing presidents up to talk about what we're doing today? I think that would be worthwhile, but that's not something I want to do today. I want to say, that in a work session, would that be something this board would be interested? We can have board staff sort of summarize that for us, but in this space, as a board, we want to understand what's happening today.
President Liebig, I was just wondering, Board Member Turnbull, David, yesterday we met with faculty leadership, and he shared some Gallup poll information. It'd be interesting I wondered if you'd be willing to share that, David, with the group. And then also, that's hard data. Where are those numbers coming from? What are they really telling us? And would we be able to access that information to get some data points?
Yeah, I can briefly share that off the top of my head if you want. I'm not sure that it specifically addresses Kurt's point, but it's just about the erosion of trust in the value of higher education. So in the 15-year period from 2010 to 2025, those who responded that four-year university degree is very important has dropped 40 points from 75 to 35, if I remember right. While those who say that it is important has risen 20 points, so it's not a total gap, but the ones who say it's not really important at all has risen 20 points as well. So
And that's the
is what-
basis of my question, Dave, is like what you're talking about, is incredibly broad, right? The value of higher ed writ large versus, okay, one of the values of higher education is an improved civic, responsibility and discourse in the thing. That's what so I was just trying to clarify, okay, for this, are you driving at that? Or are you driving, because if we're driving at the question that David's, the broader, that's just a longer, bigger conversation than.
So that poll to me speaks more to the ROI perspective in economic terms, probably.
Right.
But I think we have a responsibility as a board, and this goes all the way down through K through 12. And I work with some charter schools that they have a specific mission of creating citizens. They have a civics-driven curriculum. And I frankly am not sure where we are in the university system in that regard. And I think it's a responsibility of the university system. And, to point made previously, getting people to, getting our students trained up to be, critical thinkers, but also open-minded, willing to listen to other people in respectful ways, willing to engage in dialogue without getting into the, pitted, my way or the highway kind of things. I just see that is a trend that has swept America over the last several years, and we've all gone to our camps and we've become tribal. And the university is a area where that shouldn't be. We can't sustain that and sustain our country the way it needs to be.
Well, and Kurt, by doing this, would we change the mindset? I think we would, based on civil and providing this learning about what the institutions are doing from a civic standpoint. But those are things, can we measure that? Does it really? That'll be a long-term project, but we do have to begin at some point. And it does appear to be a trend. And if it's being done in K through 12, then we should be finding out what our institutions are doing and if it's making a difference in the short term.
I think you'll feel it before you can measure it.
Well,
Yes.
and now that I understand, because I apologize if I didn't, but
I'm not saying I articulated it perfectly.
yeah, I think these are honestly, they're related, but they're two different things. And now that I understand kind of where you're going, I actually echo, I think one of the opportunities and responsibilities that we have in this is I actually do think markedly, if you pay attention to what David's speaking about nationally, I think our institutions are in fact quite different in Idaho. And I think part of what our responsibility is, I look at the reaction that each of our 4 institutions, and frankly our 4 two-year institutions had during some difficult periods of time. They had a markedly different reaction than their peers across the country. And so I think part of what we, if in the way you're defining it, makes tons of sense now. I get it, but like, is getting data from them and having a conversation as to, with those presidents at this upcoming meeting, as to, okay, what combination of culture, talent, and environment led to a different response at the University of Idaho, Idaho State University, LC, Boise State, at those times? Why have we had opportunities for more, frankly, controversial and difficult discourse to actually occur and actually have it occur? What are the incidents that maybe have gone the other way? What are the traps? I mean, generally, I think one of the things that's misunderstood in the state and regionally is that our institutions have had a very different experience than their peers and than what's assumed nationally over the last number of years. So maybe that's where you're going, but
Yeah, I think you're reframing the question in an interesting way, which I think would be.
And then with that,
Being
what are
due
the
diligence,
opportunities
yeah.
as well? Where
Right.
that's interesting. And I think that I actually think our institutions are in a better position than their peers. One of the arguments I would make, I've made it because I've made that argument to my own kid and kids, is that one of the reasons to go to an Idaho public institution is precisely because it is a place for a more open discourse than what you'll find at other institutions. And I think it does better prepare you for, if you're going to live in this state, the responsibility that comes with the opportunity of living in this state. Not only does it provide the connections that are inherent with going into the state. I mean, we all know, those of us that did it, like, I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't grow up in the Idaho public school system and if I didn't go to an Idaho public institution and not because of the service thing with the state board, but just the connections that you make, right? Not only does it prepare you that way, but frankly, I think it does. The students that come up in front of us, they are inculcated with a sense of wanting to serve. And I don't think those students are unique. Like, I don't think it's like, hey, we picked the 10 good ones. I think they are representative. And I think our institutions do a great job of that. Now, from my perspective, it would be, what's the data that supports that and making that case? And then on the other side, how do we continue to perpetuate that at our institutions? How do we protect it, and how do we make it even more, proliferate it across, even greater across those institutions? But I think I hadn't thought about it that way, Kurt, but I think it's actually a unique positioning for Idaho higher education at all 8 institutions relative. Because that is not true. I mean, you guys all have folks that come from different institutions. I mean, I'm fortunate enough in my company to have, not only our executive leadership team, but our entire firm are people that are educated at places, both public and private, across the entire country. And I would argue that when we talk about these things a lot, and I would argue that, I sit there and it's like, that's not the experience we're having. That's not the experience of our kids. That's not the experience of, and so that's a unique framing point.
To your point, Bill, I think that's one of the reasons why so many people are moving to Idaho, because they appreciate that. And how do we measure that? How do we perpetuate that?
I think we start from a better place, number one,
Yeah.
to your point. And we're a small state. And from small things, we can set a model that can be viewed as a model going forward. It's kind of like yeast leavening the bread, right? That's what we need to be. And we need to start here. We need to start with in our own backyard, and then let that filter out. The governor of Utah is doing great things in this regard, but we just need to get back to, like, what does it mean to be a citizen, and what are your responsibilities of being a citizen? like Kurt said, if you got a public education here, you've been subsidized by the taxpayers. So what are you going to do in return?
And then talking about voting, in fact, I had one person suggest to me that every student should be required to vote. We can't do that, but, it's something to really think about and encourage, and the importance of that.
I was talking to the PLC yesterday about these issues, and President Jones made a really interesting comment. He said, we like to talk about freedom, but we don't often talk about the responsibilities associated with protecting and preserving our freedom. I thought that was, and at the heart of it, I think that's what we're talking about is we need engaged citizens to accomplish that. And sometimes you get that from your family and the values you were taught. Sometimes you get it from your faith community. But I do think higher ed has a really important role to play.
Well, we've seen the example on the national basis where universities have totally embarrassed themselves on the national stage. And fortunately, our universities have been a beacon in that regard. But let's start from a good place and let's improve on it.
There's a responsibility. So, what I talk about a lot within our family and frankly in our business and with this, is that there's a responsibility that comes with opportunity. And there's been yeoman's work by the legislature, by the governor, by the state for a long time. This isn't recent, to expand as best we can in a small, mostly rural state, the opportunity set, right? And so, hand in hand with that, I do think, you get these kids that are in front of us and I think about the last meeting at Idaho State, or I think about this one at LC, or I think of all of these when they come forward. And you talk to these students and they're like, I'm from, Fairfield, or I'm from Mountain Home, or I'm from IF, or I'm from Kuski, or, wherever it is. And I've had the opportunity to transform and change my trajectory in my life because of the affordability, the approachability, and the interest of the institutions, right? The other half of that sentence that they're not saying when they're doing that is, I get it. I understand that I've been afforded that opportunity. And what you're talking about is, I think, maybe, measuring and codifying the responsibility that comes with that. And I do think that is a demonstrated, to your point, ROI that we don't think about. And I would say, for example, our elected leaders, they all probably inherently understand but haven't thought about it, right? And we probably haven't done the job of saying, yeah, exactly, because we're creating this opportunity for, but here's the metrics on how much more civic engagement we have as a result of this. I actually, David, you employ, Kurt, we employ a lot of younger people, and I actually would argue that I would be curious to ask the presidents this when they come before us and their staffs. I actually think the younger generation, I see it in our company, are actually more civically engaged in many ways, frankly, than previous generations. I come from Gen X, and I think they're definitely more civically engaged. I think they're more civically engaged than the boomers. I think that they come with that. I think that the perception is, frankly, that they're not, is actually quite wrong. They're just engaging differently than we have. But I think there's a lot of argument to be made there. But I think inherently we have a lot of students that understand the opportunity that they have been afforded, and that they've been afforded even in the K-12 system through advanced opportunities, right? Nobody could have conceptualized, I don't think, how powerful when they first did it, what advanced opportunities would become.
I was there.
You were there, but did you think it would be as big as it is? It's massive.
No, it's an opportunity that we've offered families that's irreplaceable.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. Though I do think there's an advantage to Idaho, and I mean that word knowingly, that we tend to have a homogeneous student body, as opposed to some of the more, I loathe the expression, elite schools. I don't believe in that expression, but there it is. seems to be, frankly, if you are west of the Cascades or east of the Appalachians, you have a different point of view. And I view that as a strength of Idaho, is that we have a homogeneous population, regardless of what somebody looks like per se or believes. And I think that's an absolute strength. At the high school level, we offered economics and we offer government. But I did come away, that's a very young age for somebody to truly grasp what those mean. And so I do think at the secondary or the beyond secondary level, that training becomes far more essential. And it doesn't have to be a class in government. It can range through any number of, from economics to philosophy, that brings that forward. But I do agree with Bill. I think this very young, and I'm a boomer, by the way, so I do believe this group, and it's like most generations push against the generation that came before. And this generation of children coming forward, and everybody under 21 is a child to me still, is a positive trend for the country. And I think it is a good thing. But it is something that I would like to see become a strong topic of conversations within our higher institutions. So there is more. I mean, look at our voting records. Idaho has pretty good voting turnout by and large. There's other areas where, look at even our municipal elections, 20%. School boards, 6%. Those things, we do need to change that.
I wonder if,
David?
I wonder if you ask students, I think of America still as a project, right? And I think if you asked a simple question like, what does the American project mean to you, what kind of answers you'd get? And I'm not expecting all the same answers, but I'd want to know that they thought about that and were able to articulate an answer.
Kurt, one thing, yesterday we talked about, well, we had the chairman of the foundation board here, and one thing that greatly impacted myself and my son as young adults is when these institutions are having capital campaigns, are they engaging not only stakeholders, but also students and faculty? I mean, sometimes just giving $5 a month, it's a struggle. You don't have much money, but you are investing in that institution, and that's an ROI example. But that's something that could be measurable, that maybe we could ask the institutions when you're running capital campaigns or you're doing fundraising, are you asking the students to also contribute, maybe not now, but would you pledge in the future once you get your degree? And that provides a buy-in.
It's a tangible thing that we can do to begin the habit of giving back.
I think everybody could afford to forego one Starbucks a month, $5.
Superintendent, can I put you on the spot?
Can I, real quick? I mean,
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of that. I think I think, flashing back 30 years now, but like many in the room will remember Louise Shattuck, who was one of the grand dames of Idaho, and then Louise McClure. I got cornered by Louise, and Sean knows both well, and was told in no uncertain terms when I received my scholarship at the institution that there was going to be an expectation that I was going to contribute time, talent, and treasure at that moment in time, right? And so you're whatever, 18, 19 years old, and these two ladies who are two of the great leaders of our state, it's like, okay, I'm in. I get it. And I think that, like, you're absolutely right, Callie. Like, we're still a small enough state. It's, we can set those expectations for our students. Like, I think getting them in front, the same thing, our legislative leaders, our business leaders, our community leaders, sitting down with them and saying, hey, welcome to because it's sort of a two-part thing. It's like, one, welcome to the family, right? You're now in the family of Idaho, kind of higher ed and but here's what comes with being in the family. That's probably something that we need to be more intentional about doing. And like you said, Pete, that's not a class, but it's part of an orientation.
It's a culture.
It's a culture. It's more of an orientation.
And it's that intentionality that I'm getting at. I'm not by saying I think we should focus on these areas, I'm not saying it isn't happening. I just don't think it's as intentional as it should be.
That's fair.
And I think if we really step back and thought about tangible things we could do that were intentional in these three areas, our narrative of the story we could tell becomes much clearer. Does that make sense?
That's fair.
Debbie, can I?
That's going to make for some very long commencement addresses when you give them a diploma with one hand and an admonition from Louise McClure in the other.
Here is your annual fund envelope.
Swipe their card on the next one. Yeah.
No, Debbie, can I ask you to weigh in here? Sorry to put you on the spot, but some of my early thinking on this came from your desire and around building civics within K-12. So how do you think there's an opportunity here, or how do you think about it?
I do. I think the implementation part, obviously I'm still thinking through what that looks like at the higher ed and listening to the conversation. We've embedded standards into every grade so that, I think Pete was talking about this earlier, that it isn't a one-time class, that there's an association with what we're learning to the why. And if I'm hearing this conversation, it isn't simply about giving you a diploma that says you're now trained to go be an engineer or go be a scientist or fill in the blank. But we want to provide an experience where we are really training citizens and embedding pieces of it, I think, across the board and at the higher ed level. Yeah, you have your gen ed classes. We're going to require you to take a civics course, but then we never talk about it again. And we don't show what that looks like in any other discipline because we're so focused on this one thing, the training, the skills, which is important. But I think that's, in my view, that's the area where we do have opportunity. What are some of those strands that can be embedded or placed into every class in some form? So there's always an element of community service or understanding responsibilities with rights and the application of what we're trying to do rather than learning for learning's sake. And clearly we want to do that better in the K-12 area. And we have standards now to help do that. And in some regard, our students aren't going to necessarily know that lesson or that field trip or that thing that they were doing, that was about civics engagement. They see it as fun. It's just added learning. And I think when we get good at it, we won't even know where it is because it's just how we do it. It's just how we live. There's that expectation that of course we're going to, explain some of those things. Could I just take one extra minute? I want to share something. I had to go find it. We as in the Department of Ed, to honor and drive more attention around A250. We have put together boxes. In fact, they're sponsored by the Albion Center through ISU. Any teacher, K-12 in the state, can sign up to get a box of things. And every month in that box, we are focusing on a different value related to the Constitution, historical documents, etc. And attached to this value, so we're asking the teacher, we want you to take 10, 15 minutes or however long you want. And we want you to focus on these values every month. And then we want your class to do something with it, and they can decide. And we've given them prompts on different supplements that can help to teach these values of our country. And we're asking the teachers then to have the class do something to represent that value. Don't just talk about it, do something with it. Is it an art project? Is it a community service? Is it a letter to a veteran? How do we take these values and turn it into something that gives back? If the teacher chooses to participate in this, they can submit whatever the projects are, or even a note of this is where we went and pictures to us. And so last month, with the value, I think it was personal responsibility. I think that was, now I'm confusing my values for the month. We just got this, the submission. And I want to share a couple with you that were picked. We do random winners because it's too hard to pick. But I just want to read quickly an eighth grader who wrote this as part of the lesson. One of the many rights we use every day is the right for public education. Whether you love it or hate it, you probably go to school. It's different for everyone. It can be public or private school or even homeschooling. However, some people don't have the right to go to school. Some ways that we can be responsible and take advantage of our public education is by trying our best to keep our grades up and keeping school and being kind in a kind and positive environment. Since many kids do not have the right to a public education around the world, we shouldn't abuse this right, but we should try our best in school. So I just think that is such a great reflection of what we're talking about. What is it that we're trying to show? And then for a third grader, for the elementary sort of winners and their class wins something, she sent a picture, and I know you can't see the picture, I'm too close. Anyway, I'll read. She draws a picture of kids on the playground, and it's like a comic at the bottom. And she says, "A right I am thankful for is you get a fair chance." Why I like it is that one is because if you get blamed for something you didn't do and you didn't have this right, you could get in big trouble. Again, third grader. And for something that you didn't do, this is why I'm thankful for this right. And she has this cute little picture at the bottom. See if I can get it in front of my face. No, it's not going to work. Anyway, we'll send it around. We just got these yesterday, explaining what this means. What we're seeing with this opportunity and this activity, I think is where we'd like to go statewide. It's that application of the learning. How do we take it and then have someone explain it, or what does it mean? I'm sorry to take some time, but I felt like it was appropriate with our students, with what we're doing in our K-12 arena. I think we do have some opportunities in similar ways for higher ed. So thanks for letting me share those.
Thank you, Superintendent. Cindy, I see you on the screen there as well. Did you have anything you wanted to add here? I know it's hard to participate remote sometimes.
No, I think it's very timely, this conversation, and I agree with Bill. I think Idaho is unique, and I think we do need to protect it because we're going to be targeted from other areas. We see it already with our state politics, and I think we need to be on guard. So it's very timely. So I appreciate the conversation.
So is it fair for me to assume that given the thoughtfulness of the comments that I heard here over the last hour, is this an area that the board's willing to engage more with our presidents, perhaps at the December meeting in a properly structured work session?
But I think, like as you're gathering it, like one of the things that we can do, I think, as long, and again, we're not in the business of creating a whole bunch of sort of extra work for each of our institutions. They got a lot on their plate. But if they can start enumerating the things that they're already doing, like I said, I don't think they get credit for. Cindy, that's a really important comment. You think about like the out-of-state groups that are starting to have impact in Idaho. It's really interesting. They're actually fomenting issues at times that don't actually exist in Idaho, right? But until they're fomented by those groups. It's like, and our institutions are, like, for example, in higher ed. Yeah, there are, you've said it many times, you come from the higher ed institutions or the type of higher ed institutions, and you said this, so I think I'm paraphrasing you, but like, that have had the kind of issues and are having the kind of issues we see on the national scale. And the reality is there's a reason we're not seeing that here. Okay, so let's list what our institutions are doing that's different. And I think one, as a badge of honor, but two, as a reminder of, okay, these are the things we need to make sure we're behind and do more of it. How do we lean in? I think that would be really a useful thing for us because there is a, one, there's a narrative that we're probably countering, but two, it's allowing the citizens of Idaho, to David's point, like, look, our institutions produce a really good ROI from just a straight productivity workforce perspective. But we're getting a great ROI on that as well. Let's codify that.
I would agree with that, but caution that we're not immune, because we saw this during COVID with school boards under attack, with libraries under attack, and so we're not immune from radicalization and sort of that sense of community that we all share for the most part, but it can be torn down pretty easily.
Yeah. Fair.
And I do,
Go ahead,
if I
Jen.
may, I do think these efforts result in a return on investment for our students too. So we're talking about them as kind of distinct paths, but I think we've blended them nicely here. I mean, when we talk about civil discourse and the value that brings our students in the classroom, the value that brings our faculty in the classroom, and the quality of that engagement resulting in retention, and the quality of learning that comes out of an environment like that is a return on investment. And then we think about the civic engagement. We know students are more likely to stay and succeed when they have an internship opportunity, or they have an externship opportunity. They have an opportunity to invest in their community or participate with industry in their community. And those are returns on investment as well. And so these are things that, I think our institutions do that reap a lot of benefit for the students they serve. And so we get kind of multiple opportunities for success here.
And as I look at the work of this board, I think it's part of it too. I mean, I think a lot of the cultural issues, Bill, that you talk about on our higher ed, LC's been here since the late 1800s, right? I mean, the culture's been built from that, right? And a lot of why we don't see the kinds of things you see elsewhere in the country is because of that Idaho culture that's embedded in these institutions. But this board has also been very proactive, I think, and well ahead of the curve on talking about the importance of freedom of speech, really debating that, talking about it, articulating what we mean by that, the importance of academic freedom, and standing and being willing to stand up for it and defend it and respect the importance of creating environments for these challenging conversations. I think this board has been very clear about that. And I think we need to continue to try to stay ahead of these debates. So if it's all right with all of you, I'll work with Jen and Heidi and the team to try to structure a conversation with our presidents around this, starting, with having a concise report out of why is Idaho different? The question you asked, why didn't, when fires were burning on many campuses across higher ed, why was Idaho different? What is it about our culture, fabric, things we do? But then what else? But then I think the second part of this is, I think there's room for for improvement here.
Well, and maybe the third thing to add to what David's saying is, because our institutions are in a unique position to understand it, what are the biggest threats that they're encountering to that cultural, are they seeing cultural shifts? Are they seeing threats to open discourse, to appropriate and considerate dialogue, right? Or the opportunity for dialogue. Are they seeing threats? And, we're not on the ground. It'd be good to know from them.
The threat to freedom of expression comes from both extremes, right? And it's actually good for us to see what happened on, the Harvard University and Columbia. It's good to see that, because that's, the left, and I hate left-right comparisons, but basically that's what those university systems became. They became silencers of free speech. I think one of the things that Idaho is doing right now, Boise State's doing, the Institute for Advancing American Values, right? I sit on that advisory board, and we brought in speakers from every perspective. And people come to those lectures, and they get informed, and they get different perspectives, and they're all respectful. Nobody's being shouted down. Idaho Listens, that Greg Carr sponsors, is going across the state. The more of that we can do and, collaborate between our universities, I think would be just a beacon for the nation.
Kurt, if I may, though,
Yeah, Pete.
I think it wouldn't be a bad idea as the work group is looking at this. This is not a unique time in our universities. I went to a university that, while I was a cadet, that the ROTC building was burnt down because of Vietnam. And so this is not unique in our history. You know, people say that we're at this time of terrible divide and the Civil War is just around the corner. As a historian, we've been down this road many times before, and we've come through as a people. So I'm not downhearted on this, but I do think it's important to push a deeper understanding of how our system works throughout the system. K-3 is too young. High school is not.
Thank you.
Well, I'd agree with that, except that when you have a flare-up, you got to tamp down the fire. And I think, Vietnam, that era was a flare-up. Right now, we're experiencing a flare-up.
It was not a good experience.
We'll get through it.
Thank you for the really thoughtful conversation. We talked about a lot, and I'm sure you're going to reflect on this conversation as you're driving 6 hours back through the mountains. But so if you have ideas or thoughts as you reflect on this that you think could help frame the conversation or how we have the conversation with our presidents, send a note to me or Jen, or let's grab a cup of coffee or something. Does that work?
So I'd like to also throw that invitation out to our presidents and have them tell us what they are doing and what things they think they could do additionally.
Mm-hmm.
Not to put, we have a few minutes here, not to put any of our presidents on the spot, but is there anybody that wants to comment what, yeah, I see President Wagner and Cynthia. I mean, Jenny, I don't want to put you, a comment on, are we talking, from your perspective, are we talking about the right things in terms of, because this board has limited places where we can weigh in. We have limited time. Is this conversation relevant from your perspective?
Thank you, Board Chair Liebig, members of the board. It is music to my ears and my heart. And as I shared yesterday, our mission is very simply to help students become successful leaders, engaged citizens, and lifelong learners. It is in our DNA. It is the essence of what we believe, whether they're getting a certificate, a 2-year, a 4-year, they want to be a nurse, a diesel tech, it doesn't matter. That's the foundational essence of what we're about. So thank you for having this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, President Wagner.
I would just add, I appreciate this discussion too, and in an era where people can get information and news on their phone that makes it look like what they're reading is happening right next door. I think it's important for us to be able to emphasize what's happening in Idaho. And that's what you're talking about, is let's talk about what the institutions are doing here and what matters to us as a state, as a community. We need to combat the social media, the information that students, that parents, that legislators, community leaders are getting that makes it sound like it's happening right next door. It's happening in their communities. The only way that we can combat that is talking about in honest and open and very distinctive and very clear ways what's happening here and what matters to us. And at Idaho State, we would welcome that discussion.
Okay, thank you. Well, did you want, Tori, did you have one comment?
President Green couldn't be here today, but I thought I'd just add in for a second. I think this is a really important conversation. I know he does as well. And I think talking about it more in the way that those questions you were just asking about, what are we doing, so that we all are more aware of the great work that is happening. There's definitely room for improvement, but I think there is so much going on that we already do on these topics. But clearly, we don't all know about it. Our legislature does not know about it from the discussions we hear, and I think those are important things that we share more broadly.
Okay,
absolutely.
Thank you. President Shin?
Thank you. I agree with everything that's been said. I think this is the conversation we ought to be having. I think Idaho is uniquely positioned, as Member Turnbull said, to be a model for how to have this conversation. I think beyond civics and civility, I also want to broaden the conversation, or maybe introduce a different conversation about when we talk about the value of higher education, I think one of the underappreciated areas is that all of our institutions, 4-year, 2-year alike, serve as community anchors, drivers of economic development, job creators. We help business and industry solve problems. And so I think that that's an underappreciated part of what our Idaho higher education infrastructure does. I think that we focus so much on what's happening on campus, but there's so much that happens beyond that and so many contributions to the community that I think that we have an opportunity to highlight as well.
Thank you. That's a good point.
President Leavitt. Have we hear from President Jones?
Oh, did Gordon come back? Oh, there's Gordon. Yeah, Gordon, I don't know if you heard the prompt. I was just asking the presidents if they felt, I made the point that there are very few places the board can lean in with limited time. Is this an area, from the president's perspective, is this the right place for us to lean in here over the short term?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. My 2 cents is I think it's welcome discussion. I do think that I know at our institution, and hopefully all of us think a lot about what is the purpose of public higher ed. I've often prioritized at our institution the idea of economic and social mobility as being an undergirding in public higher ed, and perhaps I dare say that in this era I've more placed the priority on economic mobility and the belief that we're living in a world of lifetime learning. Not every 18-year-old necessarily has to self-actualize, and that life is a journey where if we can get that economic stability in through higher ed serving as a doorway for that, that's valuable. But there's a lot that's asked of institutions, and welcome the discussion. So that would be my remarks.
Thank you.
President Liebig?
Yeah, Heidi.
Just to summarize, it's a very helpful discussion, and I think it's important that the board is doing this work, so I'm excited for it. I think I heard kind of 3 themes. Culture, so what is the culture on the campuses and how are they sustaining that? Curriculum, what's going on in the curriculum and where could it be bolstered or enhanced? And then community, where are the places that the institutions are impacting communities? So possibly that could be the kind of frame that we bring into the December work session.
Thank you, Heidi. So we'll go to work to structure the session. Let's anticipate having an engaged discussion with all of our presidents on this area, but I really appreciate the thoughtful comments here today. It's been really helpful, so thank you. I believe that, Jen, any closing remarks? I believe that covers our agenda. Thanks, everybody, for traveling to Lewiston. Safe travels home, and we'll see you in
The
December.
motion to adjourn? Move adjournment.
Do I have a second on the motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you. And again, thank you to Lewis and Clark for hosting the meeting. I know, ton of work. Thanks to the AV guys.